Elite forces are not created by weapons, technology, or physical strength alone. Those elements matter, but they are not the deciding factor. The true difference begins long before a mission, long before deployment, and long before the first shot is fired. It begins inside the mind. In U.S. elite military units, mental training is not a supplement to physical preparation, it is the foundation. Everything else is built on top of it. Modern warfare does not reward the strongest body if the mind collapses under pressure. U.S. elite forces are trained around this reality. They operate in environments where information is incomplete, time is compressed, and consequences are irreversible. In those conditions, fear is unavoidable, stress is constant, fatigue is guaranteed. Mental training exists to ensure that none of those factors control behavior. From the earliest stages of selection, candidates are tested psychologically before they are tested tactically. Instructors deliberately create confusion, fatigue, and uncertainty. Instructions may be vague or change without explanation. Tasks may appear impossible or pointless. This is intentional. The goal is not to teach skills at this stage, but to expose how the mind reacts when structure disappears. Some candidates become angry, others freeze, many quit. Those who remain learn a critical lesson early. Clarity is a choice, not a condition. Mental training in U.S. elite units is built on stress inoculation. Just as the body adapts to physical stress through controlled exposure, the mind adapts to pressure through repeated confrontation with discomfort. Candidates are placed in scenarios designed to elevate heart rate, distort perception, and compress decision-making time. The stress is real, but it is controlled. Over time, the brain learns that stress does not require panic. It requires focus. Fear is not eliminated in elite training. It is studied. Candidates are taught to recognize fear as a biological response, not a command. Breathing techniques are introduced early not as relaxation tools, but as control mechanisms. Slow, deliberate breathing stabilizes vision, reduces cognitive tunneling, and restores decision capacity. This skill is practiced until it becomes automatic. In real operations, there is no time to calm down. Control must be instant. One of the most important mental skills elite forces develop is decision-making under uncertainty. In training, candidates are repeatedly placed in scenarios where there is no correct answer. Every option carries risk. Every delay worsens outcomes. The purpose is to break the habit of waiting for certainty. In real missions, certainty rarely exists. Elite operators learn to make the best decision with the information available, commit fully, and adapt immediately when conditions change. Another defining element of elite mental training is cognitive endurance. U.S. elite forces are expected to think clearly after hours or days of physical exhaustion. Sleep deprivation is not an accident in training, it is a feature. Candidates must perform complex navigation, communication, and problem-solving tasks while their bodies are depleted. The objective is not cruelty, it is realism. In real missions, rest is unpredictable and often unavailable. Mental training also targets emotional regulation. Anger, frustration, fear, and adrenaline are powerful forces. Left unmanaged, they destroy judgment. Elite training does not suppress emotion, it disciplines it. Candidates learn to identify emotional spikes in real time and prevent them from driving action. This is achieved through repetition, feedback, and constant self-assessment. Emotional control becomes as important as weapon safety. Visualization plays a critical role in elite mental preparation. Operators are trained to mentally rehearse missions in precise detail. Routes, contingencies, timing, and decision points are visualized repeatedly. This process conditions the brain to recognize patterns under stress. By the time a real mission unfolds, the environment feels familiar, even if it is dangerous. Surprise loses its power when the mind has already been there. Elite forces are also trained to accept failure as data, not identity. In training, failure is frequent and intentional. Candidates are expected to fail tasks, miss objectives, and make incorrect decisions. What matters is how they respond afterward. Instructors focus on analysis, not punishment. Candidates explain their thinking, identify breakdowns, and correct behavior. This builds resilience and removes fear of failure, replacing it with responsibility. Team-based mental conditioning is central to U.S. elite force training. No elite mission is executed alone. Trust is built through shared stress, not speeches. Teams train together under pressure until they develop shared mental models. Members learn to recognize signs of cognitive overload in each other, slower movement, shortened responses, loss of situational awareness, and compensate without being told. This silent coordination is a product of mental alignment, not instinct. Elite mental training also prepares operators for moral and ethical complexity. Real missions are rarely clean. Civilians may be present. Allies may behave unpredictably. Decisions may carry long-term consequences beyond the immediate objective. U.S. elite forces are trained to process ethical considerations rapidly without paralysis. This requires strong internal frameworks reinforced repeatedly during training. Operators must act decisively while remaining accountable. Another critical aspect is adaptability. Elite forces are trained to abandon plans without emotional attachment. In training, instructors deliberately invalidate plans mid-execution. Equipment fails. Intelligence changes. Objectives shift. Candidates who cling to the original plan fail. Those who adapt succeed. This conditions the mind to prioritize outcomes over process. Flexibility becomes a reflex. Mental toughness in elite forces is not about aggression. It is about patience. Operators may spend hours waiting, observing, and doing nothing. This passive endurance is psychologically demanding. Training includes extended surveillance exercises where nothing happens. The mind learns to remain alert without stimulation. Boredom is treated as a threat to awareness, not a relief from danger. Elite mental training also addresses identity. Candidates are taught to separate ego from performance. Personal pride is dangerous in elite environments. The mission matters more than the individual. Training reinforces humility through constant evaluation and correction. Operators learn that competence is demonstrated through consistency, not recognition. Over time, the mental relationship with stress changes. Stress becomes a signal to focus, not to flee. Uncertainty becomes normal. Pressure becomes familiar. This transformation does not happen quickly. It requires months and years of deliberate conditioning. The result is not fearlessness, but reliability. This is why elite forces are trusted with missions others are not. Not because they are immune to fear, but because they are trained to operate while fear is present. Their mental preparation allows them to function when conditions collapse, when plans fail, and when consequences are severe. As operators progress, mental training becomes more individualized. Weaknesses are identified and targeted. Some struggle with decision speed, others with emotional control, others with sustained focus. Training adapts to expose those weaknesses repeatedly until they no longer dictate behavior. This personalization is one of the reasons elite forces maintain effectiveness across diverse missions. Elite mental conditioning also emphasizes situational awareness. Operators are trained to constantly update their understanding of the environment. This includes spatial awareness, threat recognition, and anticipation of change. Training scenarios are deliberately cluttered with distractions so that candidates learn to filter relevant information from noise. Awareness becomes an active process, not a passive state. The ability to recover mentally after high-stress events is also trained. Elite forces are exposed to controlled after-action stress, where they must quickly transition from intense activity to calm analysis. This skill prevents emotional carryover that can degrade performance in follow-on missions. Mental reset becomes a learned behavior. Instructors reinforce the concept that confidence must be quiet. Loud confidence masks insecurity and invites error. Elite forces are trained to project calm, not dominance. This calm is not personality, it is discipline. It allows operators to influence situations without escalation and to maintain control when others lose it. Over years of training and operational experience, elite forces develop a distinct mental rhythm. They move deliberately, speak concisely, and conserve energy. Every action is purposeful. This economy of thought and movement reduces cognitive load and preserves clarity during prolonged operations. Ultimately, elite mental training produces operators who are predictable under pressure. Not predictable to the enemy, but predictable to their teammates and commanders. This reliability is the true measure of elite status. When everything else becomes uncertain, elite forces remain consistent. The public rarely sees this process. What they see are results, missions completed, objectives secured, crises resolved. What remains invisible is the mental discipline that made those outcomes possible. Long before a mission begins, it has already been won or lost in training. Elite forces are different not because they are extraordinary individuals, but because they have been shaped by extraordinary mental discipline. They think clearly when thinking is hardest. They act deliberately when chaos surrounds them. And they remain accountable when the margin for error disappears. That is the mental training that makes elite forces different. And that is why it never ends.